So can you talk a bit about your background in tech and business journalism and how the industry has changed with your career?
Of course, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Dan Fromer. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of The New Consumer, which is about 2 years old now as we record this. But I've spent the last more than 15 years now kind of at the intersection of technology journalism and also kind of new media entrepreneurialism. I started my career at Forbes.com, which in some ways is a traditional business magazine, but we were the website, which was like in a different building, even a kind of a different corporate structure. So it was a little more kind of forward thinking, a little more technology driven, not focused on filling magazine pages, but on building an audience on the web, for better or worse. And I took some of those lessons to my second job, which was becoming the second employee and really on the founding team of a site called Silicon Alley Insider, which is now Business Insider. We started off covering the New York tech scene in 2007, which was, there were budding young companies like Tumblr and MongoDB and some other companies like that are now, well, at some point Tumblr was worth $1 billion, but it was a really interesting view into the beginning of the New York internet scene. And then also for me personally, what it looked like to start a business news publication from zero and build it into one of the biggest in the world. So since then, I've kind of bounced between working at bigger companies, help them build audiences, build brands. As a technology journalist, I was the tech editor at Quartz, and then I was the editor-in-chief at Recode, which is part of Vox Media. But for me, I've always been interested in starting new brands, in putting things out there that didn't exist, that should exist. And I had seen the kind of rise of two things happening. One, in the media industry, the rise of these subscription newsletters. I don't call what I do a newsletter because it is also a website that, in my opinion, has one of the best reading experiences of any publication on earth. To me, that's really important. But also, it will be more than a newsletter and a website someday. It will be events and community and all the things that make a modern media company. But anyway, the thing that was happening is that because of technology like Stripe and which powers payments online, and Memberful, which is a software I use to kind of sync up membership and an email list, it was actually very easy for an independent publisher to set up a new shop on the internet, get readers and get revenue, and meaningful revenue, not like collecting 5 cents every time someone looked at an ad. If that's even, that might be even generous, maybe a penny. But all of a sudden I could launch this new publication with a subscription that may seem expensive to some, but a great deal to others. And and essentially build a revenue and profitable business from revenue positive and pretty much, as we say, ramen profitable business from day one. So the technology and kind of the interest in supporting those types of publications had been bubbling up, from the mid 2010s. Probably the most famous is Stratechery, which is run by Ben Thompson. Obviously, a huge inspiration to me. Others are like, it's called the Air Current, which is a former Wall Street Journal and CNN aviation reporter who started his own publication. These are people that I've known professionally for a long time. And I saw this and said, okay, I know how to do the technical parts of this. This model really speaks to me because it's a direct relationship with the reader, who is your customer. You can create a product that is really tailored to this professional audience. For me, that means not using jargon or words that people couldn't understand, but it means like, what are some topics that I can dig into that perhaps would be a little more advanced than a general publication would do. But the bigger thing that happened is that I've been writing about tech, the tech world for a long time. And I was less interested in kind of some of the mechanics in the tech, what's called the tech industry, Personally, I'm just not all that interested in policing Facebook. It's just not that interesting to me. To me, what's more interesting is how technology changes the world. Literally, how an iPhone, or rather two iPhones, can get you Uber. How all industries can change because of technology. And being in New York in the 2010s, we started to see companies like Warby Parker and Harry's, in a way, these direct-to-consumer product companies that were not really tech companies, but they were using tech to build an audience and build a brand in what I thought was a novel and interesting way. And I started to get really interested in these companies and how they do business, who they are, what they're all about, how they conduct themselves differently, how they build an audience online without requiring this weird codependent relationship with big retail companies. And I also have a huge personal interest in food and beverage, grocery, and consumer packaged goods. I always have. What I noticed 2-3 years ago was that I wasn't finding the articles that I wanted to read about these companies. They're super interesting. E-commerce was obviously how more commerce would be done in the future. But I just became really interested in these companies and in this field. So I decided about 2.5 years ago, wow, this would be a really great topic for one of these professional publications. I'll go really in depth in consumer trends and in company reporting and analysis in a way that folks just aren't doing, especially for small private companies. Fewer folks were analyzing 2 or 3 person startups that could grow to become the next great food company or the next great stroller company or whatever it is. So those are the things that kind of came together and inspired me to create the New Consumer about 2 years ago.
So the New Consumer focuses on the intersection between tech and consumer brands, like you said. What are some of maybe the biggest or key changes that tech has made to the consumer experience over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. One is just the way that you buy things. I mean, in almost every aspect of that. Before, you had to go to a store. The store only carried certain products. You learned about those products through the store. Maybe if you didn't like what they had, you went to a nicer store or a cheaper store or just a different store, and then you would give them your card or cash, and then put the product in your car or in a granny cart or where, depending on where you live. And then, I definitely walked home an air conditioner once, which was super fun when I lived in New York. And that was it. And you didn't really have a relationship with the brand. You probably didn't even know what the brand was all about. You just wanted an air conditioner or something like that. And your financial relationship was with the merchant. And then maybe you would have a loose relationship with them. You'd see an ad every once in a while, and maybe you would go back to that store. It was a very kind of analog, and I wouldn't even call it a relationship. It was just something. And technology changed basically every single thing that I just talked about. You could design and build products differently for a more specific niche audience. That's so much of the activity that I see now in consumer packaged goods, in food and beverage, in consumer products. They're not designed to work for 5 billion people. They're designed to work for a smaller number of people with specific needs. The way that people learn about new brands and new products is just vastly different now than it used to be. Then, of course, the shopping experience. You can buy anything you want, without having to wear clothes, in your house, anywhere, on your phone, in seconds. It's wild, and we take it for granted, but it's new. It's relatively new, and it's amazing. And it just means so many different things. It means that you can take a long time to make a purchasing decision. You can do all kinds of research. There can be middlemen like the Wirecutter, which is now part of the New York Times, which is basically a better front end for Amazon. There's just so many different aspects to shopping and commerce now that are purely because of technology. And we don't need to go too deep into the weeds about every single aspect of the shopping experience, but think about how brands want to play a role in your life now, and including like having a participation in society and in politics. It's just a vastly different relationship that people have with brands. Again, these things all sound kind of obvious and we take them for granted, but they are driven by technology and they are relatively new, and they have completely changed the way that commerce is done. And it's pretty awesome.
So you recently reviewed an app called Levels, which tracks and analyzes your food and activity data. How do you think that hyper-personalized products will impact consumer trends across industries? And do you see one industry as having the biggest impact?
Levels was cool. Levels is a continuous glucose monitor that you wear on your arm, basically. And there are a lot of interesting things happening there. One is that they don't make the monitor. It's just an off-the-shelf monitor from Abbott, which is a huge pharmaceutical company. But because Abbott made this technology mostly for people with for diabetics, a company like Levels is able to tap into that data feed that comes from the medical technology that's on your arm and analyze it and correlate it perhaps with the food you're eating or the exercise you're doing, and give you a graph and a report on, and specifically like you log the foods you eat and you can see the spike or not so much of a spike in your glucose levels. And I thought that was super fascinating. Another interesting thing there though is what happens when all of a sudden you can see things in data patterns and data sets that you just would not be able to see with a much smaller sample size. And to me, that's the most interesting thing about some of this stuff, is that the more mainstream that things like, even step tracking or sleep tracking or glucose monitoring get, the more we'll learn about how things happen across populations, the more we'll be able to perhaps even see things starting before they start. Another great example are these, I even have one too, a Bluetooth thermometer, and they had been able to track flus in certain populations and certain schools because they could see people having fevers, and boom, now you can track an epidemic basically with a $12 thermometer or something like that. So the networked power of technology and inexpensive products, as they become more mainstream, I think we'll learn a lot more about not only our individual bodies, but kind of the body as, and whether it's epidemics or general trends across populations. I think we're going to start to learn a lot of stuff that we just didn't really see before. But personalization is a really interesting part of probably the next 20 years of commerce. It hasn't really happened yet, but it's going to start. And the first steps are Netflix. Like, you watch these shows, you'll probably like these other shows. But 5 steps down is, hey, we've been watching your blood sugar for the last month. You should really try these products and see how they work for you. And that's something that's exciting. Of course, I'll always have to note now, because we've seen some of the challenges that adding technology and algorithms to our life has caused. We've seen that maybe an algorithmic newsfeed that everybody looks at isn't the best thing for mental health or the furthering of truth or democracy, all these things. So I also think about that in the case of these things. What sort of ethical and moral considerations are these e-commerce stores and online grocers building into their algorithms? Maybe none right now. I'm not really sure, but that's something for me to research and something I think about all the time.
Definitely. You mentioned new developments during the pandemic, new product development. What would you say is the biggest consumer impact from the pandemic, or any trends that you think are here to stay, or what is a good indicator of a trend that will last?
Right. There were a ton of exciting short-term trends like sourdough bread baking, puzzles. I still have my puzzles somewhere. hand sanitizer, wipes. The wipes companies really cleaned up last year, and Clorox bleach had probably their best year ever by a long shot. The bigger story is the shift to e-commerce, and we saw in many categories a real spike, especially in grocery and food and beverage, where historically people who bought groceries online were doing it out of convenience. It was 10% or less than 10% of the market. Huge market, $1 trillion a year market just in the US. So all of a sudden, overnight, basically, it was this as if you flipped the switch, and all of a sudden, online grocery just shot up. It recovered a little bit, but has plateaued at a level that is significantly higher than it was before the pandemic. First of all, that's hundreds of billions of dollars in spending, which is pretty interesting. And then second of all, you think about, well, what is a grocery store? If you're going to shop for groceries online, are you going to do it at your grocery store's website? Probably not. You might do it through an aggregator like Instacart or Amazon. So there's not only money changing channels, as we say, from retail to online, but there's a huge opportunity to lose or gain market share in what's called a share shift. It means that the grocery store needs to rethink what it means to be a grocery store, and then everything up and down from there will probably change as well. Not overnight, but over decades.
What are some of the most underrated and overhyped recent consumer trends or companies that you've witnessed?
There's a couple of things. One is I'm personally skeptical. It may turn out to be a huge, great business, but I'm personally somewhat skeptical of these products that are kind of called functional food or beverage products. A lot of them are, again, it may turn out to be a great business, but personally, I'm not super interested in them. I don't know. I'm not interested in that as a consumer. I've tried them. I understand why that is appealing, and I do believe that technology and science will make products healthier over the long run. I'm much more interested in entrepreneurs and companies that are looking at a category that is, dominated by big, boring food companies or consumer packaged good companies that hasn't had any innovation in years or decades, where the supply chain is just super established and not super inspiring, and really just taking a fresh look at it. And maybe these won't be the biggest businesses, but there's an amazing spices company called Diaspora Co. that sources spices directly from Indian farmers, and they're the best turmeric I've ever had. It's the best version of those spices I've ever had because it is done with care and with intention, and she's claims to be paying the farmers much more than they would ever get through a traditional relationship with a big spice company. And she's able to do this because she can build a brand online, she can sell direct to consumer, she can start to get retail distribution, but she can really do this with full focus on the quality of the product and building a relationship with her customers.
It's funny you say that. I've been looking into adaptogens and kind of trying to debunk the whole functional foods thing.
Yeah.
I really like.
I may be completely wrong about that, but I'd love to not be.
No, it's fine. I'm same page. And then for the final kind of lightning round, I want to give you a consumer trend or idea, and you can tell me whether you think it's underrated or overhyped, overrated, in like a sentence or two. So kind of like a lightning round, but with a little more
Love it.
Okay, all right, let's start. NFTs.
The short term, definitely like faddish and fully hyped. I would say over the long run, I think digital art and a new business model for creators that does not rely on like a predatory gallery system, or and allows artists to share some of the profits as things are resold. I think that's inevitable. So maybe NFTs will be the way that that happens or not. Was the $69 billion Beeple sale like pure? Maybe not. But the pricing is just silly these days. And almost, it matters a lot, but it doesn't. So that was not a 2-sentence answer.
No.
But I'm optimistic about the future of digital, new business models for digital creative sales and kind of ownership. But the last 6 months of NFTs are definitely silly to a high degree.
Subscription boxes.
I think as a general model, I'm fairly skeptical. I don't really like subscription product stuff. I've been thinking about it, and we're actually researching some parts of it right now for a story, but there are probably verticals where it makes a ton of sense, and there are verticals where it just makes no sense. And it's probably not obvious from the beginning which one is going to be which. Things that you replenish, like Amazon Subscribe and Save is a decent product. I've been using it every month for years. I get paper towels and dog food sent to me every month. Great. Is it the right model for? I mean, if you look at something like Birchbox, which was way hyped for years and then kind of crashed, but still exists. Some people are still paying Birchbox customers. So a lot of these things will spike and recede, but I'm sure there will find some verticals where those things make a lot of sense.
Meal kits.
Not for me. And if you look at Blue Apron, if you look at their stock price and their performance, again, one of these things where it just turned out to not be nearly as big of an opportunity as kind of it was portrayed. But there's a new CEO, and slowly but surely the metrics are inching up. So, again, not dead yet, but there are elements of the meal kit that make a lot of sense. But is that a separate brand and a separate company, or is that just a corner of the grocery store, or part of some other delivery? I think that makes probably more sense.
The ethical consumer.
I think it's real. I think that especially younger generations, I question this, right? Because it's easy for someone to say that they care a lot about sustainability or the environment or something like that, but is it in their top 2 factors that drive a purchase? Is it number 12? Obviously, it depends on the person, but on the other hand, you see survey after survey, and especially young consumers, they care a lot about that sort of stuff. So it really is up to, it's this vicious circle where it is ultimately up to the consumer to drive the purchases that make the brands care about maintaining ethics, whether it's in supply chain or employment, labor, or whatever. So TBD. I would say it's appropriately valued and hyped, and we'll just have to see now. There's still people buying a lot of sketchy stuff that's really cheap on Wish and on Amazon. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Clearly not everyone is acting ethically right now or shopping ethically.
Buy now, pay later.
Seems to be working. I haven't used it personally just because I don't want debt, even if it's like, $10 a month. But it does seem to be working more than I expected it to be. The risk though is that, you know, you look away for a minute and then everyone's got $1,000 a month in Klarna bills,
Mhm.
or Affirm or whatever it is, and that I am concerned about.
Social commerce.
Um, I think it's definitely going to happen. Um, it makes sense because your friends have your attention and credibility in a way that some random stranger may not. The question is it actually going to be like, is it just for fun or is it a business? And then those have different kind of paths. Then are we going to have everyone essentially like running multi-level marketing scams on their friends now with affiliate links or live stream shows where they show off everything in their closet or something like that? Or is that going to be a more, I don't want to say professional, but more of a professional thing where like some people try to make that a part-time job or a full-time job, but most people don't do it at all. Certainly the tools are going to be available where basically everyone can become an e-commerce merchant without much friction.
Mhm.
And word of mouth really is the best thing to drive commerce. So I think it's going to be a thing. To me, the question is just a matter of like how, you know, for how many people and how big of a thing relative to other commerce. If I had to go positive or negative on that, I would say I would say maybe it's overhyped, but I'll probably be wrong.
And then I just have two more.
Yeah.
So the resale revolution.
It's definitely a thing right now. It's a great question. I mean, I'm doing a horrible job telling you over or under on these.
Or gray area.
Uh, I think it might be underhyped because, see, I don't know. People love new stuff though, and they love. This is the fundamental question: will people stop loving cheap, crappy new stuff, and and really get into classic, used stuff that is not perfect but is probably better made and has a story to it? I still think people like new stuff too much. I don't know. So much of it depends on like how effective we are at messaging climate change and like landfills filling up and that kind of stuff. But so maybe it's underhyped.
And then the last one, minimalism.
It's funny. I was thinking about this morning. I think minimalism is done. All that stuff is cyclical. I still like it personally, but when I think of the brands that are most exciting right now, none of them are minimalist. Some really high quality brands are still minimalist, and I'm personally not a super maximalist, but I'm into like bright colors right now, and not that you would tell from my shirt, but I don't know. I think minimalism perhaps died with the pre-pandemic consumer. I think dying is the wrong word, but anyway, I think minimalism is fading right now.
I would agree with you. I've been thinking about that. I do think the pandemic was really what did it.
Yeah, I think people just want bright colors, excitement, wacky stuff,
And
and
stuff, yeah.
and minimalism will have its time again. But I think right now people want something a little more fun and interesting.
Definitely.